Hello everyone, welcome to a new chess video. We all have that funny friend who tries to beat us with the fool's mate. In case you don't know what the fool's mate is, it's this one right here. Notice that they would come here with the bishop and the queen and checkmate us with these two pieces in just 3 moves. But notice that what we're going to show you in this video is not just how to beat it, but how to punish it brutally because your friend has gone too far with the joke. Notice that here we can make some huge mistakes when they bring out the queen on the second move, for example. We can't attack it directly because if we did, they'd immediately give us a check, and then on the very next move they'd take our rook. So we'd already be completely lost in that situation. We have to be extremely careful when they play the queen here and make sure to make the right moves, okay? What is the correct move you should make when they bring out the queen right away? You should place the knight on c6, defending this pawn, since for now that's the only thing they're attacking. Notice, for now they're not attacking this because it's defended by the king. We defend the pawn with the knight, and now they'll keep trying to give us the scholar's mate. Look, now the queen is targeting us, and the bishop is also aiming at the f7 square. Now, we can't make the mistake of attacking the queen with the knight, because then they checkmate us on the next move. Therefore, now we do have to play the move g6. Why? Because now they can't capture us here, nor here, because it's defended by the knight. Therefore, white has to retreat. Notice that if they place the queen on f3, they're threatening the scholar's mate again. Before, they were threatening it from here, now they're threatening it from here. So, how should we continue? Well, the best way to continue is by developing our knight. It's no longer defended by the pawn, but it is defended by the queen. Therefore, it's defending against the checkmate. Look at this position. Right now, our opponent has made 2 queen moves, so they've lost time, while we've already developed both knights and have prepared this little hole here to fianchetto our bishop and castle, keeping our king super safe. Notice that here, in this particular position, the white pieces can try to do various different things, and we're going to look at all of them together. You already know that the main idea of the scholar's mate is to come in and deliver checkmate right here on this square. Now, what can black do in this situation that might possibly challenge or bother white? What's our plan? Well, obviously to come here with the knight, threatening this queen and also threatening to enter at the c2 square. Notice that, for example, if they move the queen over here, we would come in with check and capture the queen, and we would even be attacking the rook as well. Therefore, if we're threatening to come in with the knight here, white might consider the following. How can they defend this square? Well, there are several ways to defend it. Perhaps the most common is developing their knight to e2, and I'll explain why. Notice that this knight had to be developed no matter what. Therefore, its 2 best squares are f3, which it can't go to because the queen is there, and e2, which it can now, and it would also prevent us from jumping in with our knight. So here, a good move for white seems to be knight to e2. How should we continue? Well, we'll take advantage of the fact that we've opened up this space for the bishop and we're going to develop it via fianchetto. We can take it easy. There's no rush to break in because our position is much better. White can play d3 to develop their bishop, which is a completely logical move, and we can calmly castle. Notice what a great position our king is in. Obviously, they've opened up this diagonal and can keep attacking, but for now, we're not worried at all. What do we need to do? We need to attack the center, and I'll explain why. Look, when our king is safely castled, and our opponent's king is not, always remember this important point. It's absolutely crucial to strike decisively in the center of the board. But before striking in the center, we can make a couple of moves to retreat this bishop. Notice that if they exchange this bishop for this knight, it actually benefits us because they're giving up the bishop pair. So the correct move is to pull the bishop back while keeping the pin on the queen. What happens here is that we can continue with the move g5, forcing it to retreat even further. The opponent's bishop, which only has 1 square, has to go to g3. It's true that it's aiming at the e5 square, but for now, we're not interested in defending it any further. Why? Because it's only being attacked by the bishop, and we already have it defended by the knight. What was I just telling you a moment ago? If I'm going a bit fast, guys, will you forgive me? It's just that I don't want this to end up being a half-hour video, so I'll try to explain it quickly. You can always rewatch the video. That's the good thing about YouTube, right? As I was saying, up until now, in general, a good central attack should usually come when we have our king safely castled and our adversary does not. So here, what would be a correct move? Well, for example, d5. Notice that right now, this is a very good move, and I'm going to explain why. Since the king is in the center, we want to open up the center. And since we don't have our king there, it's in our interest to open up the center, to place a rook, to make all sorts of maneuvers here, and so that our opponent doesn't have a well-defined center with a safe king. A well-defined center and a safe king. So here, we're threatening this pawn, but we're also threatening the bishop. Notice that if he retreats, we would take this pawn and open up the center. Therefore, a good move for our opponent here would be to capture with e takes d5. Alright, the opponent has captured. He's threatening this knight, but could we recapture this pawn or not? Let's take a look. We have a knight and a queen attacking this pawn, but since they have two pieces defending it, we can't capture. We're just giving away the pawn. But didn't you tell me, chess teacher, that this was a good move? Yes, because we have an in-between move by playing bishop to g4. Notice that we're attacking the queen. It can't keep defending the pawn because of the knight, so it has to move somewhere around here. And now what could we do? Could we recapture the pawn? Yes, but we have an even stronger move, which is to jump with the knight. And notice that right now this knight that's attacking is targeting the critical point we mentioned earlier. Now we really can jump with the knight. Notice that if it were our turn again, we would take on c2, check, and we'd capture the queen or the rook, so we'd be completely winning. That's why this knight jump is absolutely powerful. Notice that the king is still in the center. What's the real problem? That the king is still in the center. What are they forced to do here? The white pieces have to capture this knight, no doubt. Why? Because if they don't capture this knight, we've seen that we can break through here. We recapture with the knight, and notice that we're opening the files for the rook. Careful, because if it were our turn again, we would win the queen. Therefore, the queen is forced to capture here. But here I'm going to show you some truly spectacular moves. For example, we have this check right here. The king has to move because, notice, there is no piece that can block in between. If the bishop interposes, we would simply keep attacking it with three pieces and win the bishop. Therefore, here the king has to move. And look here at this spectacular move we have. We bring in the bishop, check, and the king can't go back into the pin. Why? Because then we could break the pin, for example, by capturing here. Or however we want. Or I don't know what I just said. It's fine, no worries. However we want. Now the king has to move here, so it's forced. And look at this absolutely spectacular move we have here. Knight to d7. Look at what a beautiful move this is. Knight to 7. We unleash a discovered attack on the queen with this bishop. And what's the interesting part about this position? Notice that the queen is trapped. This diagonal is completely controlled by the bishop. This rook controls this file, so the only way the queen could go is over here. But here's the pawn, and here. Here is the knight, which is why the move knight to d7 is so good, blocking the queen here. Notice that now, the only way for white to continue the game is to lose the queen. They can capture here, but we simply take the queen and look at the material advantage we have. We've won a queen for just a bishop. White has another option to threaten the scholar's mate, a4, a5, and instead of playing the queen first, thank you, they can also play the bishop first. You already know these are the two pieces that threaten the f7 square. Look, they start with the bishop first. We don't change our way of playing. Knight to c6. You'll see that the plans are very similar. It's important to play knight to f6. Why? Because this way we defend this pawn, and in case the queen comes here, we don't have to worry about this pawn. That's why I recommend that after bishop to c4, you play knight to c6. Alright? What happens here? If the white pieces play here with the queen, notice, it's extremely important that you don't make the mistake of playing knight to f6 to attack the queen, because then checkmate would come just like before. This is exactly what we mentioned earlier. Knight to f6 is a mistake. Why? Because checkmate would follow. What is the correct move here? I'm sure many of you already know the answer from before. g6. We force the queen to leave. It's important not to play g6 when the knight isn't here, because they would capture this pawn. Now, when this pawn on e5 is defended, we attack the queen with the pawn to g6 so that she has no options and is forced to retreat. And how do we continue? Well, obviously, as we said before, with knight to f6. Knight to f6, now we're blocking the mate, and as we've seen, our plan was to jump with the knight over here. Earlier, in the previous version, we saw how to defend it with knight to 2. Now I'm going to show you how to do it if they defend with c3. Because this is also a very common move. They don't want to think we have the knight here, they play c3 against us, and it seems like a good idea. Here, we're going to continue as before. Bishop to g7. We want a castle as soon as possible so we can attack the center, and notice that here they'll continue with d3. Why? So they can develop their bishop. d4 would also be possible here, but they'd be opening up their own center, so they're not interested in that. They prefer d3 to develop their bishop. We could continue with a simple theoretical move, castling. d6, but d6 doesn't interest us. Why? Because we want to break directly with d5 without wasting time. Therefore, we castle. Once we've castled the king, what do we need to do? Well, here they're probably going to pin us with the bishop, and our plan is pretty similar. We want to attack the center, but first we're going to attack this bishop, which will have to retreat, and once we attack it, we'll have it cornered and can then strike the center with d5. Just like in the previous example. Now they have to capture us. Notice that they're threatening our knight. This knight will never be able to jump through here, so what we're going to do is recapture with our own knight. It will differ a little from the previous example. Why is that? Because we have this pawn here. Now we're really coming up with some truly, genuinely, really good and creative attacking ideas here. I'll even go so far as to recommend a move that I think is just a little bit better than simply capturing directly with the knight, which would be the following. We will place our bishop right on g4, directly attacking the queen. Notice that this queen only has one square available to retreat to, so it's a forced move. Queen to e3. Notice that on any other square, we would simply capture her. Queen to e3, and now look, we could capture with the knight and we'd be even better off. Why? Because now we attack the queen again, and this is an important point. A vulnerable queen. If the queen were here, white would have many more options to consider, but as it stands, they are forced to take this knight if they do not want to lose the queen. We will capture here, and notice that we have an extremely powerful and commanding position. And I'm going to explain why. Let's analyze it little by little. We have a position where our queen is super active, attacking this point here very strongly. Our bishop as well. In fact, both of our bishops. All our pieces are developed, while the opponent only has their bishop developed. Our king is castled and completely safe, while the opponent's king remains in the center of the board. And we have some truly brutal attacks, for example, the moves f5 and f4, which can be used to set up a fork here. We have some incredible attacking opportunities. Notice that this bishop also cuts off all the king's escape routes here. Therefore, we have a very winning position. That said, how can we continue? For example, here the opponent could have several ideas. First, we need to pay attention to our two threats. The first is to attack here, but the second is also this weak point. Notice this pawn. Why is it a weak point? Because there isn't any pawn defending it. Therefore, it's an easy target for attack, for example, with our rook, or even with our bishop. If they play this move here, which seems the most logical to defend this point and also threaten this bishop, which is f3, I'm sure all of you were thinking about it, then simply, how should we respond? Well, we could proceed as follows. We retreat the bishop and would be attacking this point, which could only be defended by bringing the king over or advancing this pawn, which would be very bad as it would open the file. But we have an even better move than retreating the bishop, which is to play f5 and give up this bishop. Chesterchell, you've gone crazy. Let's see, have I gone crazy? Yes, it's a good move too, and I'm going to explain why. What happens if they take this bishop we've just given away? Well, we would have a very strong move, which would be this one here, where we attack both the queen and the bishop, so we would recover the bishop. But we have an even better move, which is to capture this g2 square with the queen, and notice that now we're capturing the rook. They only have one move to save this rook, which is queen to f3, and then we would switch sides, take the pawn on b2, and now there is absolutely no way to save this rook. Whatever they play, we'll take the rook, we'll take the knight, and maybe a pawn or two from here, and the material advantage will be overwhelming. So let's see how to punish this scholar's mate if white plays it against us perfectly. We'll start, it doesn't matter if it's with the queen or the bishop, we'll always play knight to c6. If they come this way, we play g6, and when they retreat to f3, we'll bring the knight out here. This would be the main idea. Before we look at these moves, which are absolutely spectacular, I'll leave the surprise right here for you. I'm sure you'll love it, especially if you haven't seen it yet.
My brand new book is now available for purchase, both in a beautiful physical edition and a convenient digital format. You can find it easily below, right in the very first line of the description. It's truly amazing, and I know you're absolutely loving it already.
How can we continue in this situation? Notice that here, the white pieces can play knight to 2, which is actually the best move they can make in this position. We will continue with bishop to g7, and notice that here it's possible that white plays the following move. Knight, and you might ask why? Well, precisely to protect this square here. We want to play d5, but if they play knight here, we can't do it. It's also likely that they'll play d3 first to develop their bishop. In either case, we will castle, and most likely the next move will be d3 if they play this one first, and if they play this one first, then knight to c3. Notice that now they don't let us play d5. Problem? Well, yes, it's a bit of a problem, but we're going to change our plan. We have to settle for playing d6. Notice that now this pin is starting to become a problem, and I'll explain why. Because now, since we haven't played d5, we're threatened by this knight jump, and the move bishop to g5 starts to become a slightly more serious problem. For example, here it really is important to play h6. Just like before it was important, now it's even more so. Because to prevent this knight jump, it's important to drive this bishop away from here. Now they have two options: to exchange their bishop for ours, which we would be very grateful for because it gives us the bishop pair, or if they retreat, which is the most likely, we'll continue with our move g5 and force the bishop to fall back. Therefore, we will gain a lot of space. Now we have to strike at the center. The thing is, it's a bit complicated for us. Notice that with the move d5, we can't play it now because they have so many pieces attacking this point that it would simply be giving away a pawn for nothing, and there would be no way to continue. Here we have two very interesting options, and I'm going to explain two more to you. First, let's look at this move here, which seems very interesting. Why? Because it attacks the queen and it attacks the knight. But before looking at this one, I prefer to show you the move bishop to e6, and I'll explain why. Notice we're trying to exchange these bishops. You might say, come on, Chestichel, but here you double your pawns, right? If they exchange bishops, you double your pawns. Look how interesting this is. Right now we're bringing in a queen, which could allow us to make some devastating discovered attacks. Not yet, but just to mention it. And this is starting to get dangerous. And besides, this pawn supports the advance to e5, which is what we wanted. Therefore, this bishop move is very interesting. What's another very interesting move that I mentioned to you? Obviously, knight to d5. We'll place this knight here, and notice why it's so interesting. First, we're creating a double attack on the queen and the c2 square. Look, now if the queen moves, we would capture here with check and take the queen, so we would be completely winning. Also, the only square this queen has is to come over here, so here we would be winning material no matter what. The only move that saves them is to capture this knight, obviously, otherwise they would lose the queen. We recapture with the pawn, and notice that this knight is pretty cramped. Careful, because I'm sure all of you are thinking about bringing the knight over here. That would be a huge mistake, because this queen would be trapped and we would win it. Look, it can't go anywhere thanks to this pawn. So if they bring the knight over here, you've won the game. You capture the queen with bishop to g4. But another option is that they come forward here with the knight, and I'm going to show you a move that will really surprise you. A great move here is knight to h7. Look at what a wonderful move this is. And you might ask me, why knight to h7? If here, well, move the knight, I castle, do whatever you want, right? I castle long, I could even come over here later and break through all of that. Notice that this knight has gotten itself into trouble. We'll play the subtle move c6, attacking this knight. Notice that this pawn controls these two retreat squares, so it can only go this way. And with a move as simple as a 5, this knight is completely lost. It can't go anywhere. At most, it can be given up for this pawn, but we'll simply capture it and we've won a piece. Also, notice how well we're doing, since we can break the center at any moment, so we would end up in a much better position. Well guys, that's it for today's video. I sincerely hope you really appreciate these videos, because I know you truly love them.
Remember that right down here in the description you can find my new book, and you can get it both in physical and digital format. See you in the next video, friends. Goodbye.